If you live on the front end of the tech stack, or more specifically, if you live in the Jamstack, then you are going to absolutely love this session. Your next speaker of the 2021 CityJS conference is Colin from Boston in the USA. Colin is the co-founder of Clerk.dev, and in this talk, Colin is going to be taking a critical look at developer tools and suggesting a few tweaks to their APIs to make them far more useful to front-end and Jamstack developers. I'm sure this talk is going to result in a lot of questions, so please do join me for the Q&A session afterwards, where we will be putting them to Colin himself. And of course, keep those posts coming in on social media using the hashtag CityJS2021 and your comments rolling in wherever you are watching along online. Colin, it is with great pleasure that I hand the stage over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Colin Sidoti, and today we're going to be talking about front-end-first developer tools for a Jamstack world. So I'm the co-founder of Clerk, and if you haven't seen Clerk or heard what Clerk is, we build simple and beautiful user management. And what that means is we do all of your sign up, your sign in your user profile. If you haven't seen us, go check us out. We're at www.clerk.dev. And when you get there, I think you'll see we're really focused on Jamstack developers. We're trying to build the best auth for Jamstack, and that really ties into this talk. Normally, when I tell people we're building auth for Jamstack, the first thing they ask is a Jamstack world actually coming? And for a long time, I'd say I was a skeptic on this question too. I kind of looked at Netlify, Vercel, and I thought like, oh, maybe, right? Like it might take off. But what really convinced me was when all the big public companies started getting involved, right? So AWS, Google Cloud, Cloudflare, Fastly, they're all kind of playing in this ecosystem now. And that makes me think, okay, there's a huge investment going here. It's definitely going to take off. It's going to take a while. I think we're still with the early adopters, but one day this is going to be the new standard. And just for a little clarity, when I talk about Jamstack, I think it's roughly the same as serverless, roughly the same as React. We're really just talking about this new architecture where there's a thick front end and a thin backend. And I know things like server-side rendering kind of confuse that a little bit. So at this point, I tend to think of it just like you're writing a lot of code in React and less code on your backend. And to us, Jamstack is a cloud-size opportunity. And what I mean by that is, when we first saw this big shift from in-house server rooms to the cloud, all of these new companies, or I guess Amazon wasn't a new company, but all of these new solutions were born out of it. So at the infrastructure level, the platform level, and at the application level. And what we're seeing is that with the new shift to Jamstack, it's kind of a whole new stack of companies supporting it. So on the infrastructure side, like yes, AWS, GCP are still involved, but we've actually seen Fastly and Cloudflare get involved too. And that's really interesting. They saw serverless, like, oh, you guys are doing stuff at the edge now. Like we've been running these cache layers at the edge for years. Like, why don't we start selling compute there too? And then obviously you have Netlify and Vercel helping out on the platform level. But to us, the application layer is still lagging behind. And we think that the application layer dev tools must adapt. And I'm going to take an opportunity here to actually pick on Stripe. I think this is like the one time in my life I'll be able to do this, pick on Stripe about their dev tools. But to me, like as a front-end developer, the experience using Stripe isn't actually all that great. So say as a front-end developer, I want a list of products and subscription plans that my company offers, or I want the current user to purchase a product, or I want the current user's purchase history, or I want their payment methods. The solution with Stripe right now is go coordinate with a backend developer. And this might be the boldest claim I make in this entire presentation, but front-end developers don't want to be blocked by backend developers, right? They would much rather just go work with Stripe directly than need backend developers to set up these like plumbing endpoints to pass data back and forth through that. And so, another way to think about this talk is how to build developer tools that front-end developers can actually use. And I'm going to kind of dive into a little more technical details from here, and we're going to break it into 3 parts. First is authentication. second is authorization, and third is errors. And these are kind of areas that Clerk needed to change things in order to make our own product work, and we're just going to share the strategies we used. All right. So first up is authentication. If you've used a Backend API before, you probably know how it works. There's a developer secret key, and that's really keys to the kingdom. You can get absolutely anything with it, and you can do absolutely anything with it. You can take any action. On the front end, you can't do that, right? You can't just put the secret key on the front end. So instead, what you can do is scope actions down to the user session token. So that instead of the developer secret key, we're using a user session token. And then we're exposing user scoped data and actions. So in that striped example before, the user should be able to pull down their own payment methods or their own purchase history. Like that should be allowed. And there's this question of like, well, how does the front-end developer actually get user session token? And what's really cool is that there's actually a standard around JWTs to do this, or JOTs, I guess I should call it. And the pattern we've seen the most and we like the most, actually Hasura uses it, where you can publish a JWK somewhere and then Hasura references, and you send them a token, does a JWK match. I think, if you haven't tried it, I think you'll have to take my word for it or give it a try after this. It is really easy, and it doesn't actually require much coordination with the backend developer. But once you have that, you're able, or a traditional backend tool is able to scope data and action requests down to just the user. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is authorization. And so I don't want to sound like in this whole talk I'm just attacking backend developers, because sometimes you do still need a backend. And I think the example I want to use here is a payment with a dynamic price. So there's two patterns you can use so say you're a payments third party and you want your user to be able to push a purchase through you. There's two patterns you can use to kind of complete this purchase where you're looping in the backend. So basically the backend needs to be able to say, this is the correct price to charge, rather than that number coming from the client, because you can't trust it coming from the client. And the first pattern is, we just call it backend finalize. And so the way that works is, first, the front end will show the dynamic price and collect card details. But at that point, the price isn't really validated. Then the front end will send the card details to the backend. Then the backend will validate the price. And then finally, the backend will finalize the payment with the dev tool. And so basically what's going on here is everything is untrusted until you get to the backend, and then the backend finalizes it. And if you've used kind of old Stripe a couple of years ago, they had the charges API. Like, this is how it worked. You would collect card details in Stripe.js and send the token to the backend, and then the backend would kind of they would add the price data to it, and then send the request off to Stripe to actually make the charge. And the big benefit of this was it's super easy for the backend developer to take actions after or immediately after the payment is finalized. So they see the payment succeeded, they'll send another API request to their shipper or whoever, say, okay, let's actually get the customer that product. The downside of this, though, is that error handling is kind of a pain, right? So any errors that the backend developer hits, they now need to pass that error back down to the front-end developer so that the front-end developer can surface it. So it's this song and dance still for the front-end developer to actually expose what they want to expose. The other approach is backend initiated, and I guess if you use Stripe now, this is what they're doing with payment intents. So the way this works is you actually start the process of the backend, and the backend kind of sends the price to the dev tool. Dev tool gives the token back and says, okay, give this to your front end. And from there, the front end can collect the details and actually finalize the payment directly on the front. the big benefit of this is that whole song and dance that I was just talking about in the backend finalized flow goes away. So now the front-end developer can work directly with the payment provider to get errors and surface them immediately without really involving the backend much. But the big downside of this, and it is significant, is that now the backend has to listen to webhooks to reliably take actions after the payment. And so, I think a lot of developers see this and they ask, like, hey, like, why can't, after the client or the front end finalizes the payment, why can't the front end just send an extra request up to my back end and say, okay, the payment's done, go ship some stuff? And the reason is basically that it's possible to lose a request between, like, after the payment finalizes and then the front end tells the server to actually ship. It's possible like the back end goes down. It's possible that network request gets intercepted. And so you can end up in this world where the payment's been made, but the finalization actions haven't been taken. And so webhooks are the solution to that. And it's kind of like you have to weigh the costs and benefits there. Like, would you rather the front end developer be able to work directly with you, or would you rather have the backend developer set up webhooks? So no great answer here, but there definitely are solutions, which is great. All right, cool. So I think the last thing I want to talk about here is errors and how we needed to change our error structure in order to make Clerk work, or at least Clerk to be good for front-end developers. I think that's really what our goal was. And so again, we're going to do a little compare and contrast of backend APIs versus front-end APIs. And so, if you've worked with backend API before, typically what you do is, as a developer, you'll handle the user input yourself, and you'll do all the validation and try to sanitize it and get it as clean as you can before you send it to the developer tool. And then the developer tool, typically, like, once they get an error, they're just like, no, we're done. Like, this is broken request. We don't care anymore. Send the error back. With a front-end API, that all changes, right? It's better for the dev tool to actually handle the user input validation. And then they can send back as many errors as possible. And I think the easiest thing to do here is show you an example. So this is Clerk's sign up screen. And so, if you go to sign up right now, you can actually do it in the background, pull up the computer and kind of look at the network request. This API request, when you click sign up, goes straight to Clerk's front-end API. So we actually separate our API into a front-end API and a back-end API. If you're a front-end developer, you talk to the front-end API. And so when you make a request to the front-end API, you're sending up, in this form at least, sending up a first name, a last name, an email address, and a password. And in our error structure, we'll actually send back all of the fields that broke, right? So we're not just going to stop at one. And we're also going to send back like a pretty message that you can display for all of them. And, I think our goal here is really just to make the front-end developers' lives as easy as possible. And like, to us, that's really the big change that needs to happen when we're talking about the new application layer for the Jamstack world. Like, we need to figure out what is the next step change in developer tools that's actually ideal for front-end developers rather than back-end developers. And just to drive this forward a little more, like, we're really trying to raise the expectations of the front-end developers. And I just want to give you another anecdote of something that happened at Clerk recently, where we have this feature in our user profile where you can see all of the devices that are logged in and also where that device last was in the world. And so to present that in the user profile screen, you could also like sign out of other devices, that feature. So to present that, we are setting up the API, and this is basically what I saw at code review. So the backend API was coming back with just this string, Cambridge. That's where I am right now, Cambridge, Massachusetts, sorry. And then the front-end developer took that and they went in their CSS and they said, okay, like, I need a capital C there. I'm going to do text transform capitalized. And then, the final output was Cambridge. And I'm looking at this in the code review, and I'm like, why did we make that front end developer do a text transform capitalized, right? Like clearly, for me at least, the backend API, or in this case, it's the front end API. The front end API should come back with Cambridge with the capital C already, so the output could just get passed through. That extra step shouldn't need to be there. And I actually asked our front end developer, I said, hey, like, why did you just put this CSS here instead of asking the API developer to give you a capital C? And I got this funny answer. I wanted to share it. It said, to be honest, as a front end engineer, I'm used to always sanitizing and checking the data I'm getting from the backend, especially when using a third-party service. And like, to me, that's just like so emblematic of the entire opportunity in building front-end first dev tools. Like front-end first or front-end developers like really don't have it good right now. It can be a lot better. We just need to be putting in that extra layer of thought, go back to first principles. What can we do to actually make their lives easier? And pick off these things one by one. And it is really what we're trying to do at Clerk. I think we're getting there. These three things are, they were our start. The history of Clerk really was, we started as a backend API, and we couldn't get developers to use us, right? We were doing many iterations saying, hey, would you use this? Would you use this? Would you use this? And eventually we figured out that the only way that developers would say yes is when we had this really strong front end focus. And we think that that trend is here to stay. And yeah, everyone should be building front end first developer tools. All right. So I'm going to check the time real quick. All right. I've gone really fast through my presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about Bodis, so our components. To me, this should be looked at as the payoff of building a great front-end API rather than the starting point. And so, a lot of developer tools, like you can even say Stripe to Stripe Checkout, Intercom, they have these front-end components that you can use and you can embed and so on, but you're not able to build them yourself, or at least not as easily as the provider is able to. They don't expose the API to do it. But if you shift your thinking, instead say, okay, I want to do the API first. That way, the developer can, if they wanted, take our components and not use them. They could just re-implement them entirely, completely with their own UX, their own design. They might like that better. And so, for us at Clerk, we always focus front-end API first, and then figure out, okay, how do we make the component work and what should the component look like? It is really cool. It's a great payoff at the end. So at Clerk, if you haven't seen it, we made this really bold, we felt that we can make a sign-in form show with just sign it. And that's what we did. If you import sign-in from Clerk React, drop that on the page, you get a whole sign-in screen. This is a multi-step flow. There's a forgot password in there, depending on your setup. You could do all up here. Like it all just comes with those, 10 characters. We did the exact same thing for sign-up. Did the exact same thing for the entire user profile screen. And here you're looking at like a tablet view of it, and it goes all the way to desktop and to mobile. We're really just trying to take this whole feature set off of developers' plates. And then the last thing we did is this user button. So, if you're on Google, G Suite, really a lot of websites now, you'll notice in the top right, there's this little picture of yourself, and you click it, and that's how you get to your profile screen, and that's also where you sign out from. We saw that pattern enough that we were like, okay, like we should just provide that as a component. What's really cool to me about all of these components is that there's no backend engineer required. So you can go to clerk.dev right now, set up all of this without any backend developer. And it's kind of like we're separating the front end from the backend, because obviously the backend still needs to know like which user is signed in. But the backend doesn't need to coordinate with the front end to do that. And the front end doesn't need to coordinate with the backend to actually sign the user in. That's all I've got. So thank you. And this is some more, well, this is our Twitter and our website. I also put my own Twitter there, so feel free to give us a follow. I will be jumping into a Q&A channel soon, and then I'll also be on Gather after. I know I went a little short here, so we'll see if the powers that be interrupt me and tell me to shift, or if I just have to keep talking. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Colin, what a fantastic talk. Thank you very much for giving it as part of this year's conference. I appreciate it. The organizers appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone at home appreciates your time, effort, and energy too. To show our love and appreciation, here is your round the world round of applause. Colin's Q&A will be starting over on GatherTown any moment now. Please do join us for that. I'm sure you have a whole host of questions for the man himself. Keep your comments rolling in wherever it is you are watching along today, as well as the social media posts incorporating the hashtag CityJS2021. Colin, once again, thank you for taking part in today's event. Colin, what a fantastic talk. I know that our Jamstack enthusiasts from amongst the audience will have really, really, really liked that one. How did that go for you?
It was a lot of fun. I think I always talk faster when I actually do it than when I practice. And so I think I raced through it, but I hope everyone liked it.
I'm sure they did. Your raciness has meant our Indian takeaway order has been delayed by 10-15 minutes. So but the good stuff comes to us in the end. That's not a reason to not slow down your talk. I'm gonna go straight on to our first question, if you don't mind. And it comes in the form of, how do you guard against tempering when you handle payment processing on the client? I think I should have been tampering, not tempering.
Sure. Yeah. So how do you guard against tampering when you handle payment processing? Okay. So I should caveat this with, like, we're not a payments company, we're an auth company. But in terms of the strategy and how you could do it, I guess tampering is the part of the question I'm having trouble with. I mean, really what the front-end first strategy allows is for you to attribute the card details being entered to whoever your current user is. And I think that likely inherently helps prevent tampering. But I'm not sure I completely understand the question.
No, me neither. So if you pop that question in, I'm sure if you bring it back up to the top in about 10-15 minutes, Colin will head into GatherTown and be able to pick up that conversation directly. Is that okay, Colin?
Yes, definitely.
Fantastic. So what I am interested to know is, Jamstack has become quite a big thing over the recent years. And as a front-end developer, that's brilliant because it's really enabled me to do some amazing stuff. Can you see a day coming when Jamstack is the default way of building these kind of applications? Or do you think there's always going to be space for monoliths in our life?
I think definitely. I think that's the direction we're headed. And to me, it's because front-end developer tools are going to end up boosting productivity. So the easiest way to build an app is going to be leveraging front-end developer tools. That's kind of just inherent in the architecture, right? Like, if you're building a backend tool, then you're only solving the backend part of the problem. If you're building a front-end tool, then you're solving the front end and the backend. And so generally, front-end developer tools are doing more for the developer, and that's going to be the easiest way to build things going forward. And I think right now we really are just that early adopters. But given that the big cloud infrastructure providers are getting in, to me, it's just a matter of time before we start to see enterprises do more with the Jamstack architecture. And like, really, they already are. It might not be their public-facing site, but a lot of internal tools are built this way already. So we're definitely getting there.
Yeah. The When are they going to switch over to their front ends and their actual applications being Jamstack focused, do you reckon? I mean, I'm not expecting dates from you, but is this going to be like,
Yeah,
do
I
you
don't
think
know.
this is a 6 month thing, a 6 year thing?
I think it's like definitely within 10 years, right?
Okay.
It's kind of it's a funny question too, because you know, we still have people with on-prem deployments that like aren't in the cloud. So the question is like, when is the lion's share there? And I think we'll be there within 5 years for sure. Probably even within 3 years. There's just so much momentum on the developer side to go this direction. And that's really me who drives things.
Yeah. And I agree completely. It's so taking a step back, I do a lot of mentoring with people new to the industry, and I get them using Jamstack tooling, specifically Netlify,
Mhm.
to get their projects out there as quick as possible. And they seem that, and that was a switch that I did about a year and a half ago. They seem to be getting up to speed with more complex applications using the Jamstack stack rather than using Ruby on Rails, which is what we were doing before. Please, everybody watching along at home, don't boo me too much. Do you think that this kind of stuff is a good learning tool and for new people coming into the industry?
Yeah, I do. I guess kind of my philosophy on learning, like I took my first programming class was like Java, right? Public static void main, and it was just like,
Boo.
what does that even mean? And I ended up falling in love with PHP, right?
Oh,
Like I'll admit it, like I could just go and I could type a couple lines and then it showed up on the website. And I had my lamp stack that I could FTP in and like just click file save and like the change was made. And that like instant gratification um, was great. And I think the development environments now, like with Next.js and React in general, like the whole dev server that's running, it's absolutely incredible. And then like the tooling, like, I don't want to toot Crick's horn too much, but like, yeah, like your students can set up auth in 5 minutes now,
yeah.
right? Like they don't need to even learn about um, like session management and setting cookies and things like that. Like they can just get to the meat of their application faster. I'm not saying that they shouldn't learn that. I think that all that stuff is helpful. Um, but in terms of like getting to 0 to 1 gratification on like, hey, I've built something, like the Jamstack ecosystem is definitely helping people get there even faster.
Yeah, 100%. And get there faster and with more fun compared to PHP.
Yes.
Sorry, man. I had to get that one in there. I had to get that one in there.
That's very fair.
Okay. We've got a extremely short question now, and hopefully this will make more sense to you than me. How have you assured cybersecurity?
How have I assured cybersecurity? Um, yeah, it's there's really it's not a short answer, is what I'd say, right? So like I would love to do a talk on our cross-site protections and how we handle CSRF and um, all of the different like OAuth, redirect URI protections we have. Like they're building auth as a service um, was phenomenally challenging. There really is like a different attack vector for every different way people can sign in. And with us, we're trying to provide every different way people can sign in. And being able to protect against all of those attack vectors, it took a lot of,
Mm.
actually, a really short answer I can give, and that might surprise people. There is a document, and it's called NIST 800 63B. Um, it's a document produced by the United States government, and it tells us basically everything we need to do to provide security. There were a few things around the edges that, particularly with like cross-site handling, that we needed to figure out ourselves that weren't detailed there. But in terms of like how OAuth should work in unison with the password flow, like all of these really detailed things that feel like edge cases, surprisingly, they're very well outlined in NIST. And it's not like, I don't know if you've ever signed into a bank in the US, but like they're clearly not following this. Like it's uh it is modern, it is up to date. Like at Clerk, we have um when a user tries to set their password, uh we check the have I been pwned leak database to make sure that that password hasn't leaked before. And believe it or not, NIST tells us to do that. They don't say go to have I been pwned. They say cross reference against a corpus of leaked databases or of leaked passwords. And so we really just we followed NIST. That's kind of the simplest way to give you an answer to a simple question.
No, I mean, it's brilliant to have a checklist like that to work off of. And
Yeah,
I'm sure there are people right now furiously Googling for that
NIST
checklist themselves.
863B. Don't Google though; it'll take you too long. Use Clerk.
Use Clerk. There you go. That's the final plug. Um, I assume people can find Clerk easily enough online, clerk.dev, I believe, and you're probably on social media yourself if people have follow-up questions. I want to
Yes.
pick your brains a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'm going to be jumping in the Gather Town after this. But on Twitter, I'm tweets by Colin. Colin is with one L, and then you can also just contact the company at Clerk Dev.
Yeah.
But also, we have a support channel on our website. So if you go to www.clerk.dev, um, there's a community Slack, and you can join. We'll even set up private Slacks with your companies to help you through the integration.
I mean, that sounds awesome, to be completely honest. That's yeah, that's the next level service from a company. It's great to
Tony,
see that.
I'm excited to help your students.
Well, let's make this happen. Colin, we are rapidly running out of time. We've got about 60 seconds left, but we have some rapid fire questions for you. We've
All
been
right.
surveying the developer landscape to find out the important answers to the important questions. First one being tabs or spaces.
I'm a spaces guy.
Welcome to the club. Although I've learned today that tabs come with a load of accessibility things. So maybe we should all be switching to tabs, as much as I hate to say it.
I'm really a prettier guy. Can I plug prettier? Okay,
Yeah,
continue though.
plug. I'm going to be honest. Whatever Prettier puts in after I've pressed saved is what it is.
Yes.
I don't know, to be honest. If you had to use one framework for the rest of your life, would it be Vue.js? Would it be Angular, React, or something different?
I love Next, and yeah, Next has really changed the game in React for
Yeah.
me. Um, yeah, I love the file system routing and the head component. Like those two things just took React from a library to a framework, and it's great.
Fantastic. I will check that out myself. I've not actually had a chance to play with that yet. And finally, apples or bananas?
Bananas. Yeah,
Bananas,
I'm
good.
I'm
Bananas.
a yeah I'm a cardio person, so the bananas stop the cramps.
Yeah, there you go. Got to have that potassium, right?
There you go.
Colin, thank you very much for your time today, giving your talk and for joining me with this Q&A. It has been a pleasure, and I'm sure the talk was very enlightening for many, many people. If you are watching along at home, please do enjoy this 10-minute break we've got coming up. Head to those sponsor booths for your last chance to win some awesome prizes. But for now, from me, it's goodbye. And from Colin,
Goodbye. Thank you.
look, he got the cue. Fantastic. Colin, thank you very much.